My name is Aaron Dana. I'm the tribal representative for the Passamaquoddy Nation, and I stand here today to voice the Passamaquoddy tribe's significant concerns with the development of the offshore wind resources. The entire tribe has grave concerns, particularly our tribal communities were never consulted until just these past few days. We were never included in the governor's offshore wind group, even though they were plotting to use some of our lands and resources as a place to launch the turbines from. The construction of the turbines and transmission lines in the ocean would disrupt critical habitats and the migration patterns of marine species, on which our communities rely for sustenance and cultural practices.
I'm disappointed to hear that Native Americans aren't being heard, Maine lobstermen really haven't been listened to much, and now the birds aren't listened to because the Audubon Society is throwing them under the bus as well.
When the Audubon says there are no offshore birds, I just think that it's all about the money. The only green energy for me is the cash that lines the pockets of those that can get it. And nothing says more than the Audubon.
My name is Eliza Donahue. I am the Director of Advocacy and Staff Attorney for Maine Audubon, and we are very pleased to offer our support to this important bill. Maine Audubon is a strong supporter of offshore wind development in the Gulf of Maine.
For the last month or so, NEFS has been pretty involved with coming up to the Capitol and watching LD 1895, the pro-offshore wind bill, pass through the committee. We spoke against the bill in the public hearing, along with a couple other fishing associations and just a couple other fishermen that showed up and gave some testimony against the bill. But NEFSA was present at every single work session. There were times that I came into a work session and I was literally the only person from the fisheries who was present, with dozens of lobbyists on the other side, dozens of people in black suits representing foreign companies or representing the Audubon Society and claiming that there aren't any birds in the Gulf of Maine. You can't even make this stuff up.
From a natural resource or from a wildlife perspective, locating those, we've advocated to the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management to locate those projects approximately 24 nautical miles off of the coast, because we have great work that's been done by some of our national partners that locating projects that distance from shore greatly reduces interactions between offshore wind and seabirds. It's also great news for migratory birds and can be also good news to many of the stakeholders that have advocated for this bill as well.
I had some things I was going to say, and I've honestly, I don't want to call them lies, but I've heard so many things that are not accurate that I really want to address, and that will probably eat up 10 minutes, but I'll go with 3. As well as lobstering, I take people on sightseeing charters. I go to Seal Island, which is 22 miles offshore. There are 224 migrating birds that go in the spring and in the fall, right in that range that I just heard the experts say, no birds are in the area, and that's not going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. Birds are going to get killed.
The first thing that came to my mind was, I know that there's a lot of money here, but man, there must be way more than I ever thought. If they can turn the Audubon Society, or they can turn different associations and organizations that are supposed to be true environmentalists standing up for marine species or birds or all different types of wildlife. But from what I can tell at this point, the only true environmentalists, the only people standing up for marine mammals, marine habitats, the birds, and whatever other life is living out there are the fishermen. That is it. The Native American tribes are some of the first fishermen that ever existed here. One of the most powerful testimonies that I heard came from the tribal leadership at the Passamaquoddy tribes. I was blown away that they hadn't been involved in any of this. They hadn't been reached out to. They hadn't been asked what their opinions were on these projects. The Native Americans have seen it for longer than any of us, how much you can just be pushed around and thrown into a box and tried to be paid off and everything else.
I also want to take a quick second to state that the National Congress of American Indians also stands in a federal opposition to offshore wind projects as well. So not only just are the Passamaquoddy tribe taking a stance in this, but tribes across the nation and in Canada are also working in solidarity in opposition of the offshore wind projects.
I'm disappointed to hear that the tribes are feeling like they have been left out of a table that has been set for several years now. And when I think about this project, I think about that finally tribal nations will be brought to the table and have a real opportunity to be absolute partners in what will be one of the biggest changes for our state, or one of the biggest opportunities. But clearly I'm missing things. All of these are floating turbines, not grounded on the ocean floor. Help me understand the tribe's opposition.
Whether it's, a set structure or the floating structure, it's still going to affect the porpoise migration routes. It's going to affect the whale migration routes. And we're big fishermen, a lot of the lobster fishermen in the state who follow the same cultural perspective when it comes to fishing their sustenance are in opposition of this as well. And we'll probably hear from a lot of those, coming up here to testify in opposition.
Say this is your floating wind farm. It has 3 chains going to bottom. Now this bottom isn't just a gob of mud. There's structure there. There's things that live there. So say this right here is a structure. They don't want to go in too deep of water because of the expense. So say this is up here. They're going to have 7 to 9 times the length of chain as the depth of water. It's referred to as the scope. So say you're in 300 feet of water, you've got 2,100 to 2,800 feet of chain, 8-foot lengths. And when the tide goes and the wind blows, all of that chain, which is down here, is going to scrub this down to the height of this. And it's just destructive.
And I think that we should think about that as Mainers and not take a stance on how much money we can make from this, but how much, we can do to keep our state of Maine here a beautiful state and hold very strong to our way of life.
They're just like the rest of us fishermen. We're the only ones left, basically, that are fighting to preserve the Gulf of Maine and leave it the way it's been for hundreds or thousands of years.